First, I want to bring to you Dr. Darren Lipscomb. Just to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Darren Lipscomb, the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management at Community College of Philadelphia. And I am been in the field for a bit over a decade now. This is prior to being here at Community College of Philadelphia. I've also served at Delaware County Community College. And have also provided some support over at Temple University, Immaculata, and Westchester University, and just happy to have again to be here, not for the sake of working at an institution, but for the opportunity to support students and think about how we can expand the pipeline to not just to higher ed, but to for me what I think is the end goal of putting students in position to transition into the workforce or into whatever their goals might be upon graduation. But pleasure again.
Awesome. Just the intro was awesome. Michael?
Good morning, everyone. Michael White. I currently work at Slippery Rock University in Slippery Rock, PA. I serve as a coordinator of information technologies and systems for enrollment management and admission. Been here just about 20 years now. Before here, I was at Carnegie Mellon for about 10, and I was at Allegheny College for about 10. Spent a lot of my time working to help young Black men in their pursuit of higher education opportunities. Not just Black men, but that was my focus because, need some help in some ways. And so I really had a burden there. So outside of my admission work, I would do advise a lot of young Black men in these campuses. So, but of course, I also recruit. So I also get out there and travel. So I've met some of these folks out there.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And last but not least, Darryl Jones.
Thank you, Candace, and thank you everybody for having us today. So I'm Darryl Jones, Senior Associate Director of Admission and Coordinator for Multicultural Admission and Intercollegiate Athletics Liaison at Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I've had the opportunity to partner with a lot of people in this whole idea of moving from the concept of access to actually succeeding in college. My philosophy, as a lot of you who know me know, is the moment of getting into college is just that, it's a moment. If you are not ensuring success, a handoff into the institution that makes people get to the degree, then you're, sorry to put it this way, but you're pimping them for your percentages. So I've been a strong vocal proponent of people doing things the right way. And I don't take no for an answer when it comes to doing what's right.
That's so classic, Darryl. Thank you, sir. So classic. Darryl, I'm going to stick with you. And I do want, just for context purposes, if you can give us a snapshot of what admissions looks like at Gettysburg, how do you get in, typical requirements for admission.
All right, well, thank you. And we'll talk about some of these details later, but we only use the common application. So students fill out one thing, and we, early on, especially in the last couple of years, have said to people, look, let's not worry about paying the application fee. If you need a fee waiver, we don't need a note, we don't need permission, just select it. So we believe in access that way. We're also one of the few places out there, I think, that says to people with regard to financial aid, if you have a single parent or single guardian situation, we don't make you chase the other person. We believe that's real justice, making people understand that for a person with whom you have no contact, or little contact, or for whom it might be traumatic, we're not going to put you through that trauma. We encourage interviews, whether they are virtual or in person, or that we do them at a CBO or at a school. We encourage some kind of interaction with us, but we do that regionally. But really what we want from people is to have them understand that if you work for a foundation or a community-based organization, you are able to call us during the application process. You are able to send recommendation to us that we value, and you are able to advocate, and we'll give you access to some things that other people might not have access to help people with a financial match as well. So, you know, since we're a College of Liberal Arts and Sciences of only about 2,600 people, we have a big enough staff to take your calls, take your emails, and be responsive. And for that, I'm pretty thankful.
Thanks, Darren. Darryl, sorry. I was just about to say Darren. Could you go next and then Mike will follow up?
Absolutely. So, you know, being at the Community College of Philadelphia as an open enrollment institution, little different, of course. So one of over more than 900 community colleges in the country, enrolling a total of 12 million students throughout the U.S. And for us, it really is about providing students with the opportunity to enter in. So we currently, students, we have about 10,000 students that are enrolled. We get about 26,000 applications over the course of the year. Students can enter in with us, whether it be through at the fall, the spring, or the summer. We get a significant, while we have a lot of students who come in the fall, we also get a significant number of students who are starting with us in the spring. Maybe they took a semester off as they're thinking about things after high school. Adult learners who are just coming back to retool. And then over the summer, a significant number of guest students who are currently at other institutions, who are transferring, who are coming to us temporarily or on a permanent basis, so that they can get credits to either take back to their institution or so that they can finish up a credential with us. What that process looks like is really just submitting an online application directly on the college's website. It probably takes about 15 or 20 minutes to complete the application. And from there, students are really just doing a placement test if needed, or satisfying placement, which could include, I know we'll jump into that in a minute, so I won't go into too much detail, but I think that as long as a student applies and they're able to satisfy placement with us at the college, then they're in, they're admitted. It's when students need a little bit of additional support, we may have some other options available for them. But again, as an open enrollment institution, our idea is to grant access, just to provide support regardless of where the students are from an academic standpoint, and then moving forward from there.
Awesome, thank you. And Mike?
Sure. So Slippery Rock University, of which, you know, there's 14, we're part of the state system, Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, which there are 14 of us. And so I'm sure you all know all of those institutions. So what I say is we're similar. So you can rest assured that many of the institutions are going to have similarities to what I'm about to tell you. So for us, a student applying to the university is fairly simple. You're really only using the Slippery Rock University application. And if it's necessary for a student to use a paper app because of technology issues, it's no problem. We still will accept a paper app. We'll actually take it from a student's hand if we're seeing them at a college fair or high school visit. But as well, students can certainly apply online. We do have a process where we've identified throughout the state a good number of high schools that have predominantly marginalized, underrepresented students. And we've already noted those schools in our system, and the fee waiver is automatic because of that. So a lot of times students don't even have to worry about that, codes or anything along those lines. All they're submitting for us is the application, the fee, if there's a fee, and then the transcript. We do not require the test there at all right now. still test optional. I know we're going to talk about that later. We don't require writing samples or any of those kind of things. So it really is a very simple process for a student to apply. We do take some time to make allowances for students in these populations to get an opportunity for admission. Already Slippery Rock was admitting 75% of the population anyway. So we're really trying to make access very easy for students, very simple. We do not want students to be left behind in any way.
So it's interesting. Thank you, Michael. And that, again, we're not trying to recruit for these institutions, but based on their experience and based on where they are, I wanted to kind of just set some context. And what was interesting is, and we didn't plan this, you all, you all just fell right into the sort of rhythm of where this conversation is going. One, for example, and I want you to think about two, because you all have a lot of experience with multiple institutions and things, but one of those things is nobody really talked a lot about the essay. If you all paid attention to things that they said, there was not this huge emphasis on the essay. But I think that this is an area where there's a ton of stuff online, encouraging students on writing their essay, getting it right. There's just millions of dollars out there and people who are trying to train students. And I know, Darren, you know, Community College of Philadelphia doesn't require an essay in any way, but give your experience as well. Can you please help people help their students with this essay business? As not one of you put it at the top of the list, and I don't think any parents and students think that it's not at the top of the list, right?
Well,
So let's address it.
One of the things I said was that we do not require writing samples. So, and I think that's true for if all the state schools, if definitely most of us. But the whole issue with the writing sample, I'm gonna call them the writing samples, because it's not always just an essay. You know, students can feel comfortable with schools that don't require them not submitting them. Students can feel comfortable submitting them no matter what. But the writing sample is only important in this regard if you're really gonna push it. It's just a way for the institution, while evaluating, to know the person, the character of the person, or to understand a little bit more about who you are as a student. And so I know a lot of times there's a lot of pressure on young people to get those essays written and then have 10 or 15 people review the essay, rewrite it 100 times, whatever the case may be. But really, what's more important is making sure, that you do use a spell check if you're going to do it, but making sure that something about you comes out of what it is that you're writing about, and putting just a little bit of effort there. But it's not that it's the number one or the number two piece of information that's going to determine whether you get into a university or not.
You know, Mike, you brought up such an important point, and I want to loop in Candace's statement that I'm telling you, Candace, it was hard for me to not roll my eyes, because I know of people through just being in the profession who charge money to help people write essays. Well, I'm 59, folks. You're not going to fool me with somebody's over-polished language that comes from a teenager. So I say about our urban kids, and I say our urban kids because we all care about them, write and keep it real and proofread. You don't need some specialist to come give you a bunch of brand new words. Now, I will tell you, in my keep it realdom, when something is really over-polished, overcooked, comes from a student who might be at a very wealthy suburban school of some sort, who is not doing well in English, and suddenly this personal statement on the Common App looks like a Pulitzer Prize thing. I know they paid for it, And it's not that I'm looking for reasons to deny them. I just keep looking for original people until I run out. We don't run out. So, Candace, thank you for bringing that up, but you know you got me fired up now, because this whole idea of privilege and access is part of what keeps Darren and Mike and me going.
Speak on it. You stay right there. Stay right there, because the other one that is really interesting is the business, because none of you said that, and we know that community college does have access to testing and they'll use it in certain circumstances, but it's not the primary. But nobody put at the top of the list SAT and ACT scores, right? But that is not going to be the sentiment from our students and families. When they hear about, going to college, they are panicked about these tests. So COVID brings us, and the pandemic brings us, lots of test optional newness, right? If you never heard of test optional before COVID, you got very familiar with it during COVID. So can you all speak on the issues of testing and test optional? I mean, parents don't believe it. They say it's optional, but send it anyway, baby. Send it anyway, because they, So please help us with the test optional issue.
We're going to
Another
spend.
one. I'm
We're gonna
about to
spend
fire them up.
Yeah, let us spend a little bit of time with this one, because the fact is, we always said the test is not the number one factor why students will get in or not get into an institution. We always said it, and even institutions that show average scores that are above normal, they'll tell you the same thing. And why is that? Why is that? Because we know that one indicator is not truly the best determination of how successful a student's going to be, right? We're looking at 4 years of education on a student. We're looking at 4 years, 9th through 12th. And we're looking at how that student took advantage of the academic opportunities they had, took advantage of what the school had to offer, and then how they persisted through that experience, those 4 years. That's what we want to. That's what we care about. And then we also want to assess the. It's hard to do, which is why sometimes you want to meet them, but we want to assess their grit, right? Their understanding of how hard are they working to achieve what they achieve, or is it that they just have that innate ability, that innate intelligence? But the fact is, going back to the test specifically, that's why when COVID happened, everybody jumped on. I mean, it was like a whirlwind. We don't need the test right now. Unfortunately, College Board suffered, right? And they're trying to do some things now to bring it back. But it's still the case that even in 2023, if you go to Fair Test or any of those, you're going to find that a very high percentage of us are still not going to require a test. Because again, we already understand at our institutions what it's taking for students to survive and to succeed. Sure, they'll say math is important, so that, with the math and science, yes, all that stuff, yes, we get some of that. But we can learn a lot about how strong a student can be from what they've done over those 4 years. I'll chill so they can, but I want to come back to some other things.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I do want you, Darren, to talk a little bit about where community colleges are on tests, because they can be a part of a process in I'll say limited way. You can correct me, because that may not be the right word.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So, as many of you already may be aware, community colleges, we typically don't require SAT or ACT, and it's been that way prior to the pandemic. It was, I think where we've grown, however, is that we we've always, for some time at least, since I've been in the industry, since it's become like a mass segment of higher education, we've done placement testing. Placement testing is our internal mechanism for determining where a student should be placed. So, and by what I mean by that is what courses they should be enrolled in, what level of English and math they should be enrolled in. That was something that we relied on heavily for quite some time. It's changing, and the pandemic certainly helped to fuel that change. I think the conversation was happening prior to the start of the pandemic, but you're seeing a significant number of community colleges around the country, especially here in the Commonwealth, that are considering grades in a way that we haven't before. People were really scared about looking at grades versus looking at transcripts versus looking at SAT, ACT, or looking at placement test scores. That has changed. Now we're at a space right now at Community College of Philadelphia in which students are able to, one, provide us with transcripts if they've graduated from high school within the last 5 years. That's something big now, because we're seeing there are some concerns around whether a student who's been out longer, if they need if there's some additional supports that they may need, if they're a little rusty in some subjects, recognizing that we get a significant number of adult learners. But it's students have a few options. Again, it can be a transcript, it can be SAT or ACT, and it can be our internal placement test, which we use AccuPlacer, if folks are familiar. And different institutions may use different tools to gauge a student's placement.
I just got to say this first. If Candace, you picked these to get us fired up, didn't you? Here's the issue that I have with this whole thing. Again, socioeconomic privilege is one of the leading indicators on how well you do on the ACT or SAT because of I know Candace, and I saw that my eyes roll. So again, privilege and access is part of the reason why colleges and universities jumped on justice as the reason why we went test optional. Now, Gettysburg happens to have been test optional since 2006, but to give you an idea of how parents are jacked up about it, so I was talking to the mother of a high school sophomore who might have been born in about 2006. And she said, tell me about testing. And I said, we're test optional, and we have been for quite some time. She said, yeah, but you really think it's important. And I said, no, we don't. And she said, you can't tell me that you don't think it's important. And I said, okay, how old's your child? She said 16. And I said, okay, we've been test optional since your kid was born. So let me tell you, I was getting ready to say, let me tell you something about yourself. But Candace, I was being professional. Here's what we know. Testing is a day. Sustained work ethic, attitude, diligence, maturity, so that you can be taught at a state school, a community college, or whatever else. That's about daily effort, daily diligence, daily attitude, daily willingness to do the work. The SAT and ACT don't measure that, which is why if a kid has an extremely high score, but they don't do well academically, well, they're not prepared to be taught. And I often tell people, if you want to talk about being taught, really some of the best teaching happens at community colleges because they're teaching adult learners, kids just out of school, kids who are still in high school, who are doing dual enrollment. So the versatile teaching you have to be prepared for is about your daily preparation, not a one-day test. So, it's another one of those things that I tell people, if you study the data that the College Board even puts out, they will tell you how people do by ethnicity and by socioeconomic level. And the results based on the history of our US education system speak to what the nation's history and injustice have been.
So the reality is, and Shakia brings this up in the chat, and you know, she's like, her question was about, you know, test optional may not be a part of admission, but it could be a part of financial aid or merit-based scholarships. And while that might be true, the reality is a student might have to take a test, right? And to give themselves options. But this to me is all about the research that the student is going to have to do to find the right fit. And we're still not talking enough about fit and match, because that's where it really comes down to. So if you really want to be test optional or test completely devoid of the test, you know, you might have to do some research and figure out it's yes, community colleges for now, but it could be that there are some other schools that you can align yourself with. So I appreciate that, Shakia, in the chat. Thanks for bringing that up.
I'm sorry, let me mention something though.
Oh yeah, please do, because I'm not going.
I don't know of a school personally that is using the test scores to determine financial assistance or financial need. So let's take that one right off the top, because that should never happen. And if it is, then we need to contact somebody, because that's not right. But as far as scholarships go, I know for a fact this entire year test scores had nothing to do with the students who receive scholarships here at all. And so I know that in many places it does, right? And I know that I'll actually tell a student, if your score is very decent enough, then there's no harm in sending it, especially if the school's optional, because it could affect things. But there are some schools, like somebody saying our college is still using test scores for merit scholarships. Again, there are, but by and large, those who say they're test optional or test blind, they're not using those scores for determination of scholarship. Like I just said, most of the students, if not all the students who received scholarships slip out this year that can only use us, we didn't use tests because we're not keeping track of them for decision making and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and so Mike reminds me to kind of emphasize again, you know, there are 8,000, if you don't count all the for-profits, colleges and universities in the country, round about that. The numbers changing regularly because of funding. You know, there are 3 people here, 4 of us representing a very large, huge industry with lots of differences and lots of changes. Now, what I appreciate about this panel already, and we just got started, is the level of transparency that you all are sharing. We kind of knew that. That's why we brought you in. But again, yeah, and they do have very deep experiences and very deep collegial relationships with other universities. So we can speak to a broader population, but we can't represent all 8,000 and know exactly what they're all doing. So we're going to do our best. But this is a big one, and I'm going to bring this up because it connected to something that Darryl said. And I do want to talk about, when you talk about college match and college fit, the issue of demonstrated interest. I did open up a can of worms. So it's a thing. So any of you who are new to this industry, I don't know if you've just gotten the job, but welcome, because this is a thing and we do have to talk about it. Not all colleges are necessarily using it in the same ways, but please, someone, maybe Darryl, you could go first on this one, to really help us understand demonstrated interest and what is it, who's using it, why is it important?
All right, so demonstrated interest for the purposes of this is basically a student has to show through emails that are tracked, through responses, through click-through rates from messages we send, through visits and other things, that you've demonstrated an interest in the college. Well, pre-COVID, that means that somehow people had to have the funding to get to a college because nobody was doing anything. So Mike, you know where I'm going to go with this. So from a justice standpoint, you know, it became this, you don't have the money to be here, but I don't care that you don't have the money to be here. So you're going to have to just find another way. So that's when colleges and universities started to have fly-in programs, but those became so selective that those weren't helping anybody either. So what I tell people to do is demonstrate curiosity. There's an old school app called Calling People that these were originally meant to have, and whoever that is, if you could mute yourself,
That's right, dude. That's
please.
right.
Excuse me, Darryl. Yes, someone please mute, or if you are one of our team, if you can mute people. Thank you. I'm sorry, Darryl.
Yeah, thank you. That's okay. But if you call people, that's a way of demonstrating interest, but also satisfying your curiosity. So you can get your questions answered by calling. You can get your questions answered by attending something virtually. You can get your questions answered by emailing your geographic representative. But the places that are being fair are taking it with a grain of salt. They should be saying, based on socioeconomic status, well, your data might run out a little early in your household. And the only way you're accessing the internet is through your phone, which has a certain number of minutes. You are not expected to demonstrated interest in the way others should. So the places that are fair are going to look at the entire context of a family and see what fairness is when it comes to demonstrated interest. And at the other end, you know, literally from a $60,000 per year private school, from a young student who emails me every week to demonstrate interest, it becomes obnoxious. So demonstrated interest is merely taking the many steps that you could take for an institution to show them that you're curious about them. I'm trying to calm down here.
We don't need you to come. We love the transparency.
Darren, based on what you said, are you going to comment on that?
Yeah, I will actually.
I saw his eyebrows raised as well.
Yeah, I'm ready.
And yeah, it's and I mean it. I think what I mean by it is just thinking about it from the lens of access, but truly institutions and their and our interest in revenue generation, efficient revenue generation. I think that sometimes we will use demonstrated interest as a means of figuring out, you know, again, which of these students are likeliest, of course, are likeliest to enroll with us. And as in line with that, based on that, the likeliness that they're going to enroll with us, which of those students do we give the most attention to? And I think that can be a bit of a challenge. I think when we have great folks or whatever at these institutions who can see through it, like the good brother Darryl Jones here, and like Michael White. I mean, I think that it helps, but every school doesn't have it. Every school doesn't have people who can look at it and who can kind of account for the disparity in experience that students from Philly, from West Philly are going to have versus the student from Lower Marion, or, you know, or from Chedifferen, and you know, and I just, so that it's I think it's just it's one of those things that we, you know, we have to acknowledge that it exists, that people are, that we're looking at it for a reason. Schools are definitely looking at it from a business model, but there of course there has some challenges that exist from an equity and access standpoint that I think we want to make sure that we prep our students for, that we're working with in the city. I think that even at Community College of Philadelphia, right now, I don't think we truly use a demonstrated interest model and providing and reaching out to students, but we're working on how we can be more engaging of students. But I think that's one of those things that we have to be, as we're again trying to become more efficient in connecting with the 26,000 applicants that we're seeing, the 30,000 plus students that are inquiring, making sure that we're not overlooking people. And I think that's really what I'm getting at, is we got to be able to, account for that opportunity to overlook the folks that really need our support with taking advantage of these resources that we offer at our institution.
So let me slide in there and put the two of you together, because I saw what you had written there, Darren, and I thought that was excellent. And then Darryl, Darryl leading off. Let me just say that whole issue of business mechanism, that whole issue of demonstrated interest, where it probably came from. A lot of these institutions pay these third-party companies a lot of money to build these models to determine who might be the most likely, like Darren was talking about. It's a lot of money. I'm gonna tell y'all right now, I wish I could tell you how much money it is. It's a lot of money. And what happens is, and I feel like that's where the whole demonstrated interest, right? Because they're saying, let's build this quotient, let's build this model, and every student that fits in this level, right? Let's say 1 to 10, they fit in 7 or 8 to 10. Those are the ones you definitely want to put your money into. Those are the ones you definitely want to assume who are going to most likely enroll, and who you're going to give your scholarships to, your scholarship dollars. Then you get the next level, and you get the next level. And so what happens is they're saying, well, you have this pool of students who came to your college fair, saw you at the high school visit, came to did a personal interview with one of your alumni, came to a football game, did all these different things. So they fit in that quadrant. Those are the ones you want to put your money into. And that's how that really, really kicked off. That's how that really works. And so with the advent of the CRM, right, which all of us are into now, the CRM gives you the ability to track that information specifically and clearly for the admissions process.
Mike, please spell out CRM for those who don't use those systems.
Yeah, you can say customer relationship management system, constituent management system, anything. You can say Salesforce that somebody just typed in. You can say Slate,
Slate, right?
Lisma. I mean, there's tons of them. So, yeah. But they are systems that really are designed to create intimate relationships between the institution and the customer, the student. And it allows you to really track every piece of information you send to them and every piece of information they give back to you. And you can quantify all of that if you desire to do so.
Right. And chances are, I would say, like, I think it's a newer phenomenon for community colleges. We're like, so we are Community College of Philadelphia is a recruit school. My previous institution was a Salesforce school. And again, so we're still, I think, we're a little behind some of the four-year institutions and using it. But I think that like you'll like you see sometimes you'll see the hints of it when you're signing up for getting your students signed up for events. You'll see it on the platforms. But that is indicative of whether the messages that you're getting back are automated. I mean, I think what's also automated, if you get a message back within like a minute of sending something, chances are we're using a CRM. But there comes some ups and downs with it. There's definitely a benefit in terms of efficiency, but just also some opportunities for folks to get overlooked when we're having that demonstrated interest conversation. But anyway.
To bring it back home though, it really, for the group of students we're talking about in this session, it really is like Darryl's saying too. Pick up the phone, write an email. I guarantee you, not a single one of us will deny that relationship or that conversation all about it. And even if I recognize that the student is not clearly admissible, maybe to slip around, I'm pointing that student in the right direction where they need to go. So they're not missing out in any way. But the key is to build that relationship because you have people on our campuses who are not caring about this demonstrated interest model. We care about the person. So we want that to resonate more than anything else.
Whew. Okay, everybody take a breath. This is really good. I do want to stay there and then shift a little bit because we're talking about all these elements that make up the admissions process. And I can tell by some of the comments that are going on in the chat, this is definitely resonating with people. We do have to talk about money a little bit, right? So all this demonstrated interest, that feeds into it. Test scores, that typically can also feed into the scholarship piece. But talk a little bit about this merit-based scholarship. That's the other one. If you do your Google searching, right? If you talk to parents and students, there's 100,000 strategies out there on how do I just get in the door so that I can get that merit-based money. Darryl alluded to it a little bit in the difference between students of means and students who are of little means. But talk about that, because a lot of the merit-based money is coming out of the admissions function, right? As a process of a little bit of discounting and a function of attraction and recruitment and yield. Need I say more? Who wants to go first?
Candace, you got to stop this. So here's what I know. And for the record, of course, I have nothing against those who have economic privilege, but we're here to talk about those who don't have it. So a lot of times in many places, those so-called merit scholarships are just a discounting strategy. If I give you 20,000, but I get 50 or 60,000 from you, I'm making money off of you. You think you're getting a scholarship? You haven't gotten a thing. We want your money. So just like Brother Darren said about the last thing, it's a business mechanism. Unless you know that same merit scholarship can be given to someone who has a full financial need, and it's used to actually sweeten their financial aid and reduce or eliminate loans. So again, you got to pick up the phone and call people. But if you look at many places, I know, Darren, I'm trying to be diplomatic here. If they're not being the same kind of generous to the kids that we're talking about in this session, run the other way, because they're not serving your kids. They are the type that will entice them with a scholarship in the first year, and then take that scholarship away and make them borrow much more the next 3 years. So it becomes, again, a business mechanism. I'm going to make a t-shirt about that, Doc, because it then becomes the institution lays out less money because the loan that you're taking out, family, is going to put more money in our coffers. So learn about the 4-year process of keeping scholarships, who gets them, what the economic spread is, and whether or not it's used to reduce or eliminate loans. I mean, because otherwise it is just a way to attract people who can pay more, which is not fair to the students we're talking about.
I'm here with you on that one, and I had to jump in. I get a little fired up about this. Again, my background is community colleges. I'm all about access, and as part of access, I'm always thinking about cost. Prior, in addition to just working directly at institutions, I've also volunteered with Minds Matter Philadelphia as their vice president for operations. If you're not familiar, just to drop something as a resource for your students, for the folks working with high school population here in the call, they work with sophomores to seniors and help them prep. Getting back on topic, the issue that we've run into, these aid packages, these award packages that I'd see schools send to students. Great experience for me, as you know, somebody that's in higher ed. Not so good for our students who are seeing this for the first time. Like, unless they have, like, you know, older brother and sister who've like been through this before, and their parents or guardians are used to the process. This is the first time they're going through it, and we know it, and we're suckering them in some cases, and I hate it. It hurts my soul. We're including, so we're playing this game, and I'm seeing it. I really, we're gonna talk a little bit about this. What I'm seeing on, like, is our students who are excited about this idea that your brother Jones just mentioned. They're getting $20,000, but I'm like, hey, all right, standard accounting practices. Let's look at the bottom line here. What's the, you know, really, what's the cost after all of those scholarships are counted up? What are we looking at? And students are still being burdened with $20,000, $30,000 that they got to find a way to pay for. In some cases, I think I'm seeing 10, 15,000, but it's still funds that students have to pay for. The other challenge that I have is that some of these award packages include loans. They're assuming that our students are going to take out the max amount in subsidized and unsubsidized loans, but they're packaging it to our students as if it's an award from the institution. That's not fair. That's not right. And I want you to keep an eye on that as you're working with students, because again, that can create a challenge. And I've had to be very, very clear with students about it. What I've asked what I've worked with students to do is to create almost like a spreadsheet in which you're doing a cross comparison of each institution, the aid that they're offering, the total cost that you're expecting, the amount that you can also expect in loans, and at the end, again, what's that bottom line? What's that dollar amount that you're going to have to cover as a student, as a family, to support that student to make it through college? So I'll stop it there. Again, I get a little hot about it because it happens far too often. And one last thing, the Joe Biden, and another thing, the one last thing I'll highlight that's just concerning is where I really see students feeding into it, as I see a significant number of students on my social media feed. You're seeing it too. Hey, little John Smith just got $800,000 in scholarships. This is amazing. And I'm like, oh man, I know. Well, one, I know cost of attendance. Most of these schools aren't going giving funds that go beyond cost of attendance. Additionally, the concern that I have is that these students, when they're applying for 30, 40 schools in order to probably gotten that much money, tell your students stop doing that. And last, it has this assumption that the student can take all of those funds with them, and they can't. That if they decide that they're going to another school, all those funds from those other schools go away. That it's contingent on them coming to that institution. So we really want to make sure students are understanding that, and that they're not thinking. I mean, I imagine that some students they get it, and you know, but I think there's some students out there that don't, and that's concerning. Some families out there that don't, and they think that there's a possibility that they can use those funds regardless of where they go. We want to make sure that we're clear on that. But all right, now I promise to be quiet.
No, I don't know if anybody picked up on this yet, but there's a reason why this panel exists. We have to pull the covers back on what's really happening from a professional development standpoint for you all, so that you can help your students translate. But I see, Michael, you got your mute button off. Go ahead.
Yeah, only because, I mean, these guys, it's a good thing we only do this. We're only doing this one time, because I might be in some fights with these two. I mean, we might be taking on some people on a regular basis. So let me just say this though. When there's this thing nowadays, and I don't know how often our population of students do, and because I always hear stories in my own office, and then around the admission world, how these families will get some money, get some information on what the money looks like. And then they'll call the school and say, well, you know, look at what so-and-so did. Look at what this other school did for my child. I want to see if you do the same thing. And demand that the institution take another look at what they did for the child and ask for more money. I don't know if we're counseling our students to do the same thing, but we need to, because even if it doesn't always work, it might work where it could or should work. And I think that our children need to have choices. Don't put all our eggs in one basket, because as you have choices and you get financial aid packages, scholarship packages from one institution, you want to have a choice and tell them, I have another one from somewhere else, and I would like to know, can you match it or do better? And don't be afraid to do it, because everybody's doing it. And I know privilege have been trained to do it, because some of these conversations that these families are having with our admission directors, it's clear that they've been counseled. Somebody counseled them to do it, or they're reading something on some website. So I feel like if it's going on there, it needs to go on in our community too, and not to just accept what you're getting in the first place, because that's when you're really, taking it to the man, we'll say. And so I really feel like that's something that I'll just add, because both Darren and Darryl covered it, but I just wanted to add that piece, because I think that that's an important piece to be dealt with.
So we're pulling back the covers a little bit, just really trying to get information underneath what you're seeing on the surface, right? So that you're able to better help your students. Can each of you, I want to open up for questions as well, because the chat's kind of flying right now too. Thank you, Darren, for also sharing that resource that you talked about. Can each of you talk a little bit about, based on these barriers that we've kind of identified, and this is, again, we only have but so much time for this meeting, but we could go on. Based on these barriers, what would your piece of advice be for our college prep community who are working with young people, working with their parents? Many of them are, so this group is not just in Philadelphia. We have people from Atlanta, we have people from other parts of the country, but some of the major larger cities, we're dealing with young people who need this level of advice and counseling and direction. What's your advice, recommendations for our professionals and our practitioners? What can they do to help students through all of these obstacles and barriers? And whoever wants to go first.
All right, there are about 50 things. The first one is this: establish your networks across the nation at places that you want your kids to go. And that's, again, pick up the phone and call. Look for that person who might have the title of coordinator for multicultural admission, but see if you can connect with the person who operates in your region. Mike, my public statements often about, admissions offices that do something called apartheid recruitment.
Right.
So the dean or director goes to all the swanky Upper East and Upper West Side schools in New York City, but they send somebody who looks like me to go to the Bronx or the deep part of Brooklyn, or somebody who does the inner ring of Pittsburgh, and somebody else does the outer ring. So you got to find out how fair and how equitable the workload is, and then you got to know who your people are, not who are just going to connect with you regionally, but also who has the juice to make financial changes or admissions advocacy. Because for me, the advocacy, again, and I have nothing against them, but advocacy happens naturally at private schools as well as really well-resourced public schools. Where's ours? I want you, our audience, our family, to create it for yourselves. And it's a different way of operating. You know, don't do the, I'm sending a general email to the general admissions office box to see what's happening. Look for the staff and pick up the phone and call the people you want, and then take it a step further. If you need to have a conversation with deans or directors or VPs to find out how everything from the admissions process through to graduation starts for the kids you serve, you know who's telling the truth, because if they speak the truth, they will do it and you'll trust it. If they start saying, well, how do you mean that? Tell me more. Well, you know, to run the other way. So I'm going to stop right there. Darren, Mike, pick me up, because again, I'm trying to stay calm.
Yeah, let me just slide in a little bit on something you said too, and that is, you know, the idea of finding the whole network thing is crucial, because what you really want to find out is, you know, like when my parents dropped me off, they wanted to know, was I going to be safe? Was I going to be careful? Was I going to have an opportunity to succeed? You want to know that about the campuses that you're pushing your students to. And the network's going to tell you that. The more you be in conversation about an institution, about the real deal, not just the surface stuff, right? You know, they got a great computer science program, or they have a great, yeah, but what are those computer science people doing for your students? That's what really matters. So you definitely want to learn that. And I know that some of you, maybe all of you, have this process where you follow your students through first year, second year, third year. Well, there are people at our institutions who are willing to have conversation with you on that matter as well. So you don't need to just stop at the admission office. You can move on as well with your student a little bit further, so that then now you can also help those who come behind them. This is what so-and-so experienced while they were there. That's really where you're getting your best bang, because now not only can you tell them about the entry, but you can tell them about the persistence. The persistence is real, because, you know, sometimes people get places and that persistence thing just doesn't look good. And you want to really know, are they comfortable? Why are they not? Or why are they persistent? What's going on? That's really where things really start to catch on. So I agree, the whole network thing is huge. And one other thing, if you have the opportunity to travel with your students, like do bus visits, I mean, a lot of us will encourage that, those tours that you might do, be there so that you can actually hear and see for yourself what's really going on. You know, I'll stop there and let Darren go on.
Well, I appreciate y'all, and I'm gonna take a different approach with this one, and this might not apply to everybody, but I think an opportunity for us to improve is me respectfully asking that folks stop sleeping on community colleges. I'm gonna ask that you stop sleeping on our students, stop sleeping on our faculty and the experience overall. I think we feed way too much into this culture of exclusivity, and the idea that we need to be admitted and have other people be denied from an institution. And I think that is doing a disservice to our students. I think there are students that we've mentioned, I mean, throughout this conversation, that cannot afford the cost of these other institutions. There are students who need some additional supports. There are students who need to be closer to home because of things that are going on at home. And I think we need to keep that in mind. I want to make sure that you're also aware that if you don't take me up on that advice, don't worry, I'm going to continue to support the hell out of these students to ensure that we prove you wrong. I'm going to ensure that these students, that they not just, transfer over to Slippery Rock or to, transfer over something more closer to Penn or the Temple or the Westchester, but I want to make sure that that we put them in position to set them up for career success. And that the students that you advise to go elsewhere, that we have those students work for our students at some point in the future. And that's me just that's how I feel about that. Because again, I really think there's some opportunities. We're all trying to get in the same to the same place. I think we have the opportunity to make sure that we work together on that one, and that we don't dissuade our students subconsciously or consciously from taking advantage of all of the resources that are available to them.
Darren, man, I'm gonna tell you right now, there isn't one of us in the state system that doesn't say the same thing you just said. So we totally agree with you and partner with you on in that matter. That's what's up. That's what's up.
I feel like we
Drop
just
the
need to drop the
daggone
mark
mic.
on
Just
that.
drop the mic. Yes.
Just drop the mic on that. I have no words. I knew that this session would be revealing because I know the three of you. I didn't know y'all were coming that strong, and I'm so happy that we did, because this is the group. The Philadelphia College Prep Roundtable was born for this reason, because this doesn't get talked about in the polite sessions, right? So you have to pull back the cover in order to help your students. We can't keep falling for the same thing and just trying to weave our students into the same systems that have not served them ever, right? So I really appreciate you. I do want to open it up for questions. I know that the chat has been flying. I haven't seen any specific questions in the chat, but please, this is an opportunity to really help your students by getting some inside information from 3 different experts here. I do want you all to have a better sense of what you need to know to help your students. So please, if you could open up for questions, you can throw them in the chat, but I think we don't have a lot of people. So if you have to, if it's better to ask your question audibly, please do. Tom Butler, the floor recognizes College Prep Roundtable.
So y'all know, right? I mean, y'all just know. Y'all just know. Anyway, I do want to take a little different slant before you guys get out of here. So DEI, we're inundated in that world, right? I mean, we're all inundated with those words, whether we know what it is or not. Everything we read, everything's publicized DEI. I want to know, as admissions professionals, representatives, particularly long-standing folks, you've been in the space for a while. How has that impacted your work? I want to hear your, I embraced everything you said about health, what we need to do to help students, but I want to hear how you're feeling about your work and what you're doing out there in the field. And has anything changed, or are you just doing the same thing you've always been doing, just put a label on it now?
You know how the 3 of us are. So here's what I'm going to tell you. It was in the 80s that I started talking about this whole idea of apartheid recruitment and how there are colleges and universities that still separate who goes to what school, even if it might be in the same city, mostly done by ethnicity. But what I tell people is that you need to look at what the institution is doing, regardless of type, to make sure your student feels like a sense of belonging. Diversity is just difference. That's easy. Equity means the institution is trying to make sure people get what they want. Although, if they're bragging, we have a great study abroad program, but they're not paying for your kids to go, they're not helping anybody. We have wonderful internships, but they're not paying for your kids to go, to buy suits, to borrow clothing for an interview. They're not helping anybody. Or, Candace, this is a personal one. I know that if I had told my mother that I wanted to stay over the summer and volunteer my time to do scientific research because it was an opportunity. My mother would have said, well, Darryl, you've apparently lost both sides of your mind today because you're not working for free. So it's this whole sense that you go beyond inclusion, which is again, the institution trying to reach out, and instead looking at what the institution is doing to ensure that we show up and we are minimizing imposter syndrome. We can't get rid of it. But what are people doing to make sure I feel like I belong? So I'm not in there going, oh, well, I don't have the money to get home during the break. I guess I'll have to, you know, as we say, scrutch and survive. We're not doing that. You know, make sure the institution is saying, we'll provide some kind of meal service and housing over that Thanksgiving break, because all of us are recruiting all over the nation and then not paying for storage, not paying for people to be there during a short break, not providing emergency funds to get people out when COVID happens. So belonging, that's what we're all about. And if you have to make sure that it is the top down trustees, board of regents, president, VPs, down to the last person, including the people who work the grounds. If places aren't about that, they're not doing. I tried to stay calm, but Darren, it's over.
You know, we recently, like many institutions, hired a VP for DEI. But just prior, I think I'm trying to hit specifically on how Thomas phrased his question about how I think it's infusing DEI in my professional life at Slippery Rock or whatever in the profession. I feel like it's very important for each of us to take this as far as we can take it while the ride is going. I mean, the ride started, we know why it started, right? A couple of years ago, a few years ago, with some heinous things happening, and then of course the COVID thing. But the fact is that on our campuses, there are discussions going on about the future of the campus, strategic discussions. And what I want to make sure here is that the strategic discussions include strategic conversations, strategic things that will be done when it comes to DEI. And so partnering with that new person, partnering with President's Commission, getting involved in President's Commission, doing that kind of work, even though my role has nothing to do with them, is very important to the cause. It's very important to the cause. And then taking time to take that information and then move it on beyond just our campus, but into the community is also very important. And so I feel like, the time is right, but we know how the time was right in the 60s when they, affirmative action and all. And then next thing you know, for 30, 40 years, it was mess. Well, now we need to keep this fire going as hard and as strong as we can. And I think that it behooves each of us to be on board with whatever activity we can, be a part of it, jump in it, be strong in it for as long as we can, and to move it forward.
Darren, I want to pull you in for any last comments in response to Tom's question and others, because I know that you have a special occasion to get to.
Just a little special. But I think to sort of respond, I think that we have done some of the work in the past. I don't think that we've done it from at an institutional level. And to some degree, right? I think that it's been the new swanky thing, of course, has been we're going to hire a DEI point person as if DEI belongs to one person at an institution. And we're going to even use that person to vet policies and to vet new hires and hiring processes. I think that DEI, of course, is it expands beyond just new hires and again 1 point person who serves in DEI. I'm especially coming from a community college. I'm curious, have we taken a look at the mix of course offerings that we have available? Are students actually able to complete but those students who have to work in the evenings or during the day? How are we structuring, how are we setting it up based on the unique needs of the different segments of our student population and truly ensure their success as students and to push them towards completion? And I think that I think that there's more conversation to be had. I think we're still missing the mark a little bit in some things in that area, and some schools are certainly doing it better than others. CCP recently created a DEI pillar. We have 6 pillars. That's our newest pillar. I want to see us really work to ensure that that's ingrained in how we in our various different practices. And again, that the jury's still out on that one, so stay tuned.
I have to say thank you to all 3 of you. And the only reason I'm doing it at this moment is because I do want to give Darren an opportunity to slide out when he needs to. I'm just going to say congratulations. He is going to his law school graduation. He didn't want to say that, but I'm going to put him out there. So just in case, there are a couple questions that came out in the chat, but I do want to give Darren an opportunity to just slide out if and when he needs to. So congratulations and thank the 3 of you. I did want to bring up, because this is a big one, and this is something that I think is important to discuss. And it crossed my mind too about how to have this conversation. But Dr. Jones asked, what's happening out there around being strategic about the declines in enrollment, which is perplexing because there are a couple of different metrics out there, one being put out by the Common App that applications are up, right? So we've got a whole lot of activity and no one showing up in September, I guess. So what is being strategic about, or what's out there that's strategic about the declines in enrollment, if any of you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I do. I think so right now. So it's interesting. Throughout the industry, we're seeing less people who are enrolling. I think we went from about 19 million to just over 17 million students over the past several years. Community College of Philadelphia has certainly, PASHE system has seen the struggles. The community colleges throughout the Commonwealth, I'm looking at them sharing their numbers, and everybody's like, it's tough. It's as far as what we're doing to really address it. I think it's a couple things. One, so first, I think Philly is a little interesting, despite Philly going from 115,000 to 111,000 students for Philadelphia school district, not including charters for this coming year. We're projecting, I think actually PASHE is projecting some slight increases in high school graduates through 2025. And then I think through 2029, we're expecting to see some slight declines. But it feels like there's some issues around confidence and what we're selling. I think that people with good reason are talking with their feet and they're not convinced at the moment. And I think that there's definitely some honest conversations that we have to continue to have on campus around the credentials that we're offering and how, and the opportunities for students to complete quicker. I think that we're doing some of that. We're seeing more partnerships between institutions that allow students to finish degrees quicker. I think before I left Delaware County created a program in which students could transfer to Westchester, finish up their associates and their bachelor's in nursing all over the course of 3 years. That's amazing. We're working on something, if I'm not speaking out of turn, we're working on something at Community College of Philadelphia right now, in which students will be able to finish will be able to finish their PharmD by partnering with through a partnership with Thomas Jefferson over the course of, I believe, 4 or 5 years. That's again, we have to think about what it is that our students want, and we got to be a bit more responsive so that we can change that piece. Because again, folks are, for a while, we've been saying, when people have asked us the question if jobs are guaranteed, we're like, oh no, we can't guarantee jobs. That's not what we do. Knowing that students are coming to us with this expectation of establishing a career, I think there has to be more commitment to that. And I think that we're starting to see it. Like, hey, we're going to get you to those credentials that you need quicker so that you save more funds and that we put you in a better position. I think there's still more to do there. But I also think that from a retention standpoint and an enrollment standpoint together, we really got to do more to target stop-out students. Stop-out students being those students who were enrolled the prior semester, they're not enrolled this semester, and we need to get them back. I think that even if we can get a segment of those students back in the door, it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for us in terms of enrollment, and it's a win for them because we got a better shot at them completing what they started. And that's both our active stop-outs, those students who are still in the system actively, who can just go back and re-enroll, as well as those inactive stop-outs, folks who've been out for a couple years now, and they're no longer active in our system. We got to get them reset. But I think those are opportunities. I think the other biggie is just positioning, and this is a tougher one because we're all trying to figure this out after the pandemic, trying to find the mix of online versus in person, trying to position ourselves to provide both the Amazon experience and the Apple Store experience. And with that, I'm thank you for your time. I do have to run. I appreciate you all, and great. Thank you to PCPR for this opportunity. All right.
Love
Thank
you,
you.
man.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
You'll
much.
be back.
Congratulations.
I echo everything that he's saying. I mean, he nailed it. I don't know if Darryl or Mike, if you guys wanted to add to that, but I am going to ask you, two of you and the entire audience, are there any other barriers out there that you're experiencing and you know, can possibly, you know, our panel speak to them, but what are some of the other barriers that are out there? Dr. Jones brought up a really good one because it does make a difference. I think of the old summer melt concept, right? That is still alive and well. Like summer melt became like a pandemic. It became the thing, right? As opposed to what happens over the summer, it became year round. But there are some other barriers that folks may be experiencing in trying to get their students connected to college. And I just wanted to both give Mike and Darryl an opportunity to address that if they had any thoughts, but anyone else in our participating audience as well, if there are barriers that you want to speak to or that you are struggling with your students.
You know, a lot of it is, you know, and I appreciate you, Dr. Jones, for asking that question. People are getting even more serious about retaining. So as again, Darren was talking about, people are getting even more serious about retaining people to the degree, because if you look at financial aid and spending it on someone who's there 1 or 2 or 3 years, you've wasted money. You keep them there through graduation and you help them to get careers started. And I said careers, not jobs. So a career is something you wake up and want to do. A job is something you have to do. Places are doing that. So you're seeing more places have student success centers for everybody. More places working on retention. More places right sizing and looking at some departments that, you know, the learning is okay, but there's no practicality that could be connected to career outcomes. Colleges and universities are having serious looks at that finally. But the big one, and this is the elephant in the room that colleges and universities around this nation have to adjust to, is this. We all know, if you study demographics, that right now, the age 1 through 18 population in the United States is less than half Caucasian. Less than. Now, if you believe talent and ability belongs to every socioeconomic level, every ethnicity, every type. We got some work to do, fam. We got some work to do, because that means all of our institutions should find a way to get, again, this under the radar talent for the students you serve, and not just get them in, but retain them through the degree and into careers. If we're not doing that, we're doing it wrong. So places need to do that, and it can't be just the sole domain of places that make their beans on denying 95% of the applicants, because that means they're not serving 95% of the people who are interested. You wouldn't do that if it was a police station. You wouldn't say, oh, well, they don't prosecute 95% of the crimes, they must be good. Or a hospital, they don't cure 95% of the people who come in the door, they must be good. But yet we place this premium, as Darren and Mike said, on selectivity somehow being the barometer for success, when in fact, the barometer is how many people we can serve and do things with. So that's why I'm saying to people, whether it's a private liberal arts school, a state school, or a community college, let's get these kids somewhere so that they do something with their life. Okay, Mike, I'm going to stop there, but you know my attitude.
Yeah, there's not much that I want to add other than just to make sure it's clear that we're talking this way based on the question that he posed. The declines that exist, and I think Darryl just touched that a little bit, the declines that exist happen because of this birth dearth, right, that occurred where people were just not having babies, right? But when you look at the statistics specifically, it shows that most of that was just on the Caucasian, the white side, because there was not really that same decline when it came to Latinx and Black families. The numbers didn't decline that way; it sort of stayed at the. So when you want to talk about strategies that institutions ought to be having, it is this: one, you better start focusing on these population of students to recruit, to retain, to graduate, because that's the population that's going to help you survive. You don't do it just because you want to survive. You do it because you want to make the lives of those young people better. Otherwise, it's not going to work anyway. But the fact is that these institutions, all of these institutions need to put that focus on those populations, because that's where it is. You're not going to do it by living in 1980s life. You got to move on to where we are right now.
Well said. Well said. I just have to take a breath. And I have to say thank you. This was a very, very powerful. Now, you guys don't have to leave. You hang around as long as you want. But I have to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Very powerful words. I really appreciate the transparency. While I do encourage professional development, going to the conferences to expand your network, you're not going to necessarily get the transparency that you got today. So just keep that as a part of your thinking. But you will get this level of transparency if you do expand your network and you connect to people directly. We have brought this panel to you because these are people who are in our network, who have actually over the years become friends in the work as well because of the fact that we were connected. And it's really powerful when you get the inside that can help your students. So thank you from College Prep Roundtable, from all of us. We thank you. We appreciate you. I do want to say that the one missing perspective that we didn't have on this panel was the HBCU, and we intend to actually bring a broader focus to the HBCU schools as well as the concept. at a later point with College Prep Roundtable, so stay tuned for that. I wanted to acknowledge that we didn't have that particularly in this panel, but we intend to bring some real focus to that as well. So thanks for being a part of this conversation.